Welcome back. Today we're going to do a quick one on the Rose Techniques Ceramics TWS. So here's the box. Typically there's some marketing on the box that tells you what's special about a TWS set. This one, not so much. There's not a whole lot going on the box. Inside the box is another box, which is actually a very cool box and probably my favorite part of this set. It's one of these, it's got a slightly rubberized texture to it. Very cool box. Then you flip that open and you kind of see a very typical looking TWS style case. So inside, I think these are very, very typical looking TWS. These are about $40. You see this style of case and shells like this, range from anywhere from $15 all the way up through $40. So not too surprising. I was kind of surprising they put it in a very, very nice box, but pretty cool. So let's kind of jump into it and actually talk about what is special about these since they didn't put it on the box. So this is a TWS set with a 10mm DLC dynamic driver. So yeah, kind of odd that they didn't really speak about that. It's really what sets this set apart from other sets. Also, why you're paying $40 for it, because they put a nice driver in it. So I thought that they should really talk about that fact, but they didn't. So I think on the Pro side, this one could be a big bass set, but it also has two other EQ modes. There's 3 EQ modes in total if you want less bass and more treble, and we'll look at those in a second. On the con side, it has a kind of a peaky valley tuning, and it's going to be really tough to fit all types of music. And it's very hard to look at it and say whether it's going to fit your style of music or not. It's, kind of an interesting little tuning, but the 3 EQ modes, but they really needed one that was balanced. They gave you 3 variations, but they probably should have given you one that was really suited towards this driver. So fit and tips, I think fit-wise, this is a very, very typical TWS shape. The shell is kind of fine. It's plastic. Tips they give you are kind of okay. I think the tips are more of a maybe for me. They didn't really fit me all that well, but do try them and then try other tips if the sound isn't quite right. So sound, there are 3 modes on this one, like I talked about. We'll look at the graph in 1 second. There's a rock mode, and that's really a big bass, less treble style. Closest to my favorite on this set, and it really works for outdoor TWS fun. Just kind of a bassy fun signature, less treble fatigue, and I thought they kind of got that one right. The pop is a drop the bass just a little bit from the rock, which is fine, but then they pop the treble, and that gets a little bit too high, a little bit too fatiguing. Probably better if you are a low volume, or if you tend to listen to lower volumes, that won't be okay for you. Then there's a hi-fi one, which is the least fun of them. It kind of lost a lot of the fun. Kind of a lower bass, more treble, and it just sounds a bit thin. So let's take a quick gander at what is going on with the graph here, and you can kind of see as I talked about. So the rock one is the big bass fun one. And I will admit that it's a 10mm dynamic driver, and that one does do some fun. But they also picked a middle line between the treble, and I think that was sort of the right move. But if you look at the balance between the two, you can kind of see this is a tilted down treble for the rock version. So yeah, there's a lot of bass, and these valleys are going to be hard to match against your music. A peak and then some really deep valleys. And I think, again, as I said, it's just a little bit hard to match to your music. I think if you just look at it as a bassy fun set for rock, I think that's fine. And then you see the pop. So they brought down the bass a little bit, and that's kind of noticeable. Not it's still high, but it's a little bit more noticeable if you listen to the rock. But this is more noticeable where they really pop the treble, and they brought that up, and that'll work, again, as I said, at lower volumes. That'll probably be more of a bassy fun for you guys. And then the hi-fi is they brought down the bass really a lot, and then really popped the treble up. These two are kind of a little far out of balance, and it just sounds a bit thin because this is really high. This is kind of quite low. Not my favorite. Hi-fi was a little hard to listen to, especially with their tips. That was really hard to listen to, but I tended to focus on the rock. That was kind of the most fun for me. So the bass, again, as I said, kind of a fun TWS bass shelf on a 10mm DLC dynamic driver. At this price point, you see lots of smaller dynamic drivers. There are some larger ones, but they clearly decided to make it known that it was a large dynamic driver with the rock tuning and that large bass shelf, and it just carries over into the mids. It's kind of a thicker big bass shelf, thicker lower mids, that kind of style. Nice warm, smooth sound to it. I can't really complain about what they did there. The mids, again, it kind of carries over it into this with the rock tuning, that thick bassy mids on one end, and that'll be paired with either peaky treble or pulled back treble, depending on how and this was just really, it's just really hard because they popped up kind of this 2K, 2.5K, and then really dipped hard on the 4 to 5K. So this presence bit, some of your music is going to sound okay, some of it is not. Some of it's going to land fine here, some of it will land here and sound a little, I don't know, a little bit murky, I think is what I said. Just really hard. And some of it's just pullback treble. And you can flip between the rock and pop, and that tends to move you between those treble levels and the balance, and I think you can kind of figure out which one works better for you. And when the rock is off balance, there's heavy bass. The mids are sort of lacking clarity. When the pop is off balance, it's just too bright and a bit fatiguing. So I tended to flip-flop between the two depending on what the track sounded like. Your listening volume will play a large part in that as well. So yeah, lots of kind of tweaking on that one. So the treble, I think the idea was to present some treble to sound natural, but not go into fatiguing territory. I think the other two EQ modes, rock is quite fine. The other two probably dip into fatiguing territory. But when it works, it works. When it doesn't, you switch EQ. And it's really tough to pull off a tuning with those high peaks and valleys. You know, no matter whether it was a TWS with a dynamic driver or any combination of a tuning element like that is just going to be really hard to sound consistent all the way through treble. And stage, again, the sense of projection is there, but it's really another indicator if your fit isn't right. And these stock tips sound quite in your head for me. I mean, maybe because they're just super wide, but yeah, I wasn't a huge fan of what they did to the stage. But for me, the stock tips are very in your head, and it really shouldn't sound like that. If you switch to a pair of tips that you might have from another set, it'll sound much better projected around your head. So that is what I got on ceramics. So thank you guys again for tuning in, and I will see you next time.